Decades ago, an adult bat mitzvah discussed Korach's rebellion against Moses, which we read just a few weeks ago. She suggested that the revolt might never have happened if Moses were a more collaborative leader. After the service, I was accosted by a guest. How, she angrily demanded, could I have let the name of our sainted rabbi, Moses, be defamed on the bimah? I tried to explain, yes, Moses is the greatest of prophets. Still, like all human beings and like all characters in the Torah, he is flawed. Our appreciation of Moses' teachings and emulating his best qualities are undiminished by acknowledging his imperfections and learning from them too. I tell this story frequently because the point is so central to the very goal of Judaism and the sacred purpose of our human lives. In Torah, Moses is the primary agent of God's saving power. Like Israelites in the wilderness, we are enjoined to follow Moses' lead, bringing our people and all the world into the promised land of a more perfect world. If perfection were the standard for a person to take part in that sacred work, then we would all be disqualified. Admitting that Moses was imperfect and yet precisely the right person to be God's mouthpiece, hands, and feet here on earth, we may understand that imperfect though we be, we too can change the world for the better. Speaking of imperfect, this week's Torah portion builds a monument, if you will, to Pinchas, a biblical character that some revere and others revile. Pinchas is honored with the portion's name, and God establishes a brit shalom, a covenant of peace, with him, one that will extend to future generations. All a monument to Pinchas' actions in the last Torah portion. There, Pinchas sees an Israelite man consorting with a Midianite woman. He takes his spear and brutally runs it through their bellies, murdering both. Many Jews revere Pinchas as an unadulterated hero. After all, as Rabbi Pam Wax writes, from the thrust of the rabbinic tradition, we are meant to consider Pinchas' actions as passion in the service of a just cause, namely preventing further disintegration of the covenant, as well as providing an imperative ceasefire to God's destructive wrath. On the other hand, Rabbi Wax writes that Pinchas was an enabler, not the friend that God needed to control and channel God's anger at the Israelites' sins. For Rabbi Wax, the episode is a perfect reminder that we are all, even God, and certainly Pinchas, on the path, learning to control our anger and our other evil impulses. Should this week's portion be renamed for a less tainted hero? Or should Pinchas be revered as unblemished? I would suggest a third course. We have much to learn from Pinchas. Zeal sometimes is needed to overcome evil. And yet the passion that defeats tyranny may also leave innocent victims in its wake. Moreover, the same people who do good inevitably also do evil. We are living through a turbulent time in American life. To quote this morning's editorial in the Democrat Gazette, the country is going through a sickness now. Fevers, it should be noted, have purposes. The body heats up enough to destroy what's attacking it from the inside, and eventually it becomes healthier in the process. The allusion to COVID-19 notwithstanding, the sickness is a 4-century legacy of violent white supremacy. The fever is angry protest, sweeping the nation, standing up to racism with a force not seen in this country in a half-century. The healing is yet to come. One of the proposed prescriptions has been to remove offensive monuments that are a blight upon America and perpetuate the legacy of white supremacy. Part of the conversation ought to be easy. Confederate monuments must go. As I said on Rosh Hashanah in 2017, memorials established to glorify secession, that is treason, are about forgetting history, not remembering it truthfully. They were built to intimidate Black Americans and to justify their continued oppression under Jim Crow. There ought to be no debate, except perhaps about what to do with these monstrosities once they are removed from their places of misplaced honor. But what of our American heroes? American heroes. Thomas Jefferson, for example, who declared that all men are created equal while enslaving human beings, who built a nation founded on freedom and democracy, but denied the same to members of his own household, even of his own family. Jefferson famously had a so-called affair with one of his slaves. Affair, though, is not the word for a sexual relationship between an enslaver and a woman he is enslaving. Rape is that word. And Jefferson continued to enslave Sally Hemings and then his own children. Many people insist that Jefferson must not be judged by modern standards. So let's judge him by Jefferson's own words. Throughout his life, Thomas Jefferson was publicly a consistent opponent of slavery, calling it a moral depravity and a hideous blot. He believed that slavery presented the greatest threat to the survival of the new American nation. Jefferson also thought that slavery was contrary to the laws of nature, which decreed that everyone had a right to personal liberty. Jefferson continued to promulgate evil, and he knew it. We would do well to evaluate all American heroes and our Jewish ones honestly. I would not advocate tearing down the Jefferson Memorial, but I would favor adding a depiction of Sally Hemings and the children Jefferson continued to enslave, appropriately complicating the reverence due an American hero. Jana is about to sing Tzadik Katamar, words from Psalm 92. The righteous bloom like a date palm. They thrive like a cedar in Lebanon. Planted in the house of Adonai, they flourish in the courts of God. Let us ever honor the righteous in our past, and let us celebrate the fruit of their goodness. Moses' teachings, Jefferson's magnificent words that built this great nation. And let us also acknowledge that not all the fruits they bore were sweet. Even 2 centuries after his death, many Americans cannot taste that goodness, but only the bitterness that Jefferson bequeathed. And let the misdeeds of Moses, of Pinchas, of Jefferson, and of countless others who are rightly remembered as heroes and rightly also criticized for their wrongdoing inspire each of us to ensure that our next actions will be good, not evil. Our legacy, indeed the future of our nation and the world, is in the balance.